Let's get you caught up on some key global stories we're tracking today.
A lot happening. We've got escalating tensions, particularly between India and Pakistan.
Right, and also the very tough work continuing in Syria with mass grave identifications.
Plus, a developing situation between Denmark and the U.S. over Greenland.
Okay, let's start in South Asia. India says it launched air and missile strikes, targeting what it calls 9 militant sites.
Yes, inside Pakistan and also Pakistan-administered Kashmir. This was apparently in response to a deadly attack on tourists.
Pakistan has confirmed hits on 6 locations. They also claim they shot down Indian aircraft.
Which India hasn't confirmed that specific claim, but both sides are reporting casualties. It's definitely a step up in tensions.
It sounds more significant than previous incidents.
It does seem broader, yes. Unlike, say, 2016 or 2019, reports suggest these strikes hit more varied targets, infrastructure for multiple groups, and deeper inside Pakistan, too.
So, potentially a more assertive stance from India.
That could be the signal, yes, aimed at deterrence. Now, experts are pretty much expecting some kind of Pakistani retaliation.
Which makes diplomacy crucial right now.
Absolutely. Preventing a slide into, even a limited conventional conflict. An interesting side note is that public support in Pakistan for military action seems, well, less strong this time around. Internal politics might be playing a role there.
Okay. Moving over to Europe now. Denmark and the U.S. What's happening there?
Well, Denmark summoned the U.S. ambassador. It's tied to a report alleging U.S. spy agencies were focusing on Greenland.
Greenland's independence movement specifically.
Yeah.
And its resources.
Exactly. And this surfaces particularly after former President Trump had expressed interest in the U.S. actually acquiring Greenland, even suggesting military force reportedly.
That caused quite a stir at the time. So Denmark is concerned about spying on an ally.
Understandably so. It's complex because Greenland is Danish territory, but semi-autonomous with its own aspirations.
Right, and those aspirations are generally for independence from Denmark, not joining the U.S.
Precisely. The U.S. obviously has long-standing security interests there, but this report clearly touched a nerve in Copenhagen. And you'll recall former President Biden criticized Trump's remarks about acquiring Greenland back then.
Okay, staying in that geopolitical space, let's look at Ukraine and Russia. Russia's proposed another ceasefire.
A 3-day one, yeah, time for their victory day. But Ukraine's reaction was pretty dismissive. They called it a theatrical show.
Based on past experience, perhaps.
That seems to be the reason. They pointed to a similar recent truce they say Russia violated almost immediately. There's just deep, deep mistrust.
Ukraine had accepted a different ceasefire proposal, hadn't they?
Yes, a U.S.-backed one for 30 days, including negotiations, but Russia rejected that one, so the positions are quite far apart.
And the fighting continues.
Reports indicate intensified shelling in some areas, and Kiev has faced more drone and missile strikes. Russia, for its part, claims it downed a large number of Ukrainian drones, causing disruptions at airports.
And former President Biden commented on this recently, too.
He did, criticizing the previous Trump administration's alleged pressure on Ukraine to give up territory. He called it modern-day appeasement, worrying about U.S. credibility with allies.
Let's turn to the Middle East now. The situation in Gaza sounds extremely serious.
It remains dire, yes. The Hamas-run health ministry is reporting numerous Palestinian casualties from Israeli strikes, this time hitting a restaurant and a market in Gaza City.
And this follows other recent reports of strikes hitting schools used as shelters.
That's right, very concerning reports. The Israeli military says it's looking into these specific incidents and maintains its operations target terrorists.
But this is happening as Israel signals plans to ramp up its campaign against Hamas.
Indeed. And international condemnation is definitely growing, alongside worries about potential mass starvation due to the ongoing blockade.
The Palestinian Authority Prime Minister described it how?
He called it a real catastrophe and urged the international community to step in and push for a ceasefire.
Okay, shifting now to Africa. Sudan has cut ties with the UAE.
Yes, diplomatic ties severed. Sudan is accusing the UAE of supporting the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, in the civil war there.
What prompted this timing?
It seems to follow recent RSF attacks in Port Sudan, which had been considered a relatively safe haven until now. Sudan's defense minister directly accused the UAE of violating sovereignty.
And the UAE's response?
They deny the allegations. It adds another layer of complexity to that devastating conflict. It's worth noting the UN's top court recently dismissed a genocide case Sudan brought against the UAE, but that was on a technicality.
And the human cost of that war continues to mount.
Tragically, yes. Both sides, the Army and the RSF, face accusations of war crimes, and the humanitarian crisis is severe.
Let's move to human rights and justice issues now. In Syria, identifying victims from mass graves, that sounds like an overwhelming task.
It truly is. The new Syrian Identification Center is facing, well, just an immense challenge. We're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of victims.
And the process itself is difficult.
It's extremely limited resources and sanctions impacting access to things like DNA testing capabilities. Experts say it will take years, many years.
There was testimony mentioned.
Yes, from a former Syrian military driver. Quite harrowing, describing transporting hundreds of bodies, mangled and tortured, to mass grave sites near Damascus during the regime's crackdown.
It must be incredibly frustrating for the families.
Absolutely. They're desperate for answers, for what's often called transitional justice, but progress is painfully slow. We heard from one woman whose 2 sons disappeared after protests, suspected victims.
A different situation now involving Venezuela. The U.S. announced a rescue.
Yes, a successful rescue is how they termed it. 5 Venezuelan opposition figures who'd been sheltering in the Argentinian embassy in Caracas.
They were trying to avoid arrest.
That's right. The Venezuelan government had reportedly surrounded the embassy for months. The U.S. Secretary of State welcomed their arrival in the U.S.
Argentina confirmed the U.S. role.
They acknowledged U.S. involvement, yes. Details of the actual operation remain somewhat unclear, though.
Okay, back in the U.S., allegations against Smokey Robinson.
Yes, the Motown legend. 4 housekeepers, suing anonymously, are seeking $50 million. The lawsuit alleges sexual assault and also significant labor violations over several years.
At his properties.
Correct. The lawsuit details specific alleged incidents. It's important to note his representatives haven't commented yet, and no police reports or criminal charges have been filed, as far as we know.
We'll have to see how that develops. Let's look at world affairs. In the Philippines, a new cardinal, Pablo Virgilio David, reflecting on his appointment.
Yes, he sees his elevation by Pope Francis as part of a move towards a church that's, closer to the people, particularly the poor.
He was quite outspoken previously, wasn't he?
He was. He recalled Pope Francis supporting him when he criticized former President Duterte's deadly war on drugs, even when he faced death threats for it.
So he's discussing the church's role now.
Right. Its historical influence, the challenges it faces with issues like divorce and family planning, and how its relationship with political power is changing. He sees the church primarily as a moral and spiritual guide, complementing government, not governing itself.
Yeah, interesting. Elsewhere, in Kenya, a case involving ants.
Live queen ants, thousands of them. 4 men, 2 Belgians, a Vietnamese national, and a Kenyan were sentenced for trying to smuggle them out, apparently destined for collectors.
Smuggling ants.
It highlights the growing illegal trade in insects, not just big animals. The court really emphasized the ecological value of ants and the need to protect biodiversity. They called it a landmark case.
What did the smugglers say?
Some claim they didn't know it was illegal, others just called it a hobby, but the court wasn't buying it.
Okay, let's cross the Atlantic again. Canada and the U.S. Prime Minister Carney met President Trump.
He did, and apparently President Trump once again brought up the idea of Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state.
How did Carney respond this time?
Pretty firmly, stating Canada is not for sale, ever.
But the overall meeting tone.
Described as largely cordial, actually, initial praise exchanged. But Trump also defended existing tariffs on Canada, citing trade imbalances and other issues.
Did Carney push back on the tariffs?
He said he did, and found Trump willing to negotiate, at least. Carney also reiterated his request for Trump to stop suggesting Canada join the U.S.
Finally, let's touch on Australia. Post-election analysis focusing on the former opposition leader.
Yes, Peter Dutton, the former Liberal Party leader. Analysis suggests his, divisive persona and campaign performance hurt the coalition, especially in his home state of Queensland.
How so?
It points to disillusionment among younger voters and women, the so-called Dutton effect. Many voters apparently wanted to avoid American-style politics, and his policy shifts and perceived lack of empathy didn't help his standing.
So quite a range of stories today.
Absolutely. From these major geopolitical tensions and conflicts to the very long and difficult process of seeking justice for past atrocities, and these shifts in politics and diplomacy around the globe.
It really underscores how interconnected everything is. You see the threads running from nuclear neighbors like India and Pakistan, to diplomatic spats over spying between allies, to the human cost in the places like Gaza and Syria.
It's true, and the personal stories wrapped up in all of this really bring home the impact.
So as you think about these reports, maybe consider those underlying forces, the pursuit of power, the fight for justice, how relationships between countries and even within them are changing.
What questions do these events raise for you about where things are heading and what might be the knock-on effects, the ripples that we haven't even seen yet? Lots to consider.